Yes,
It's official?
it's official.
Okay. Before we get started, sorry we're late. I'll just say that for anybody that eventually gets on live. Does anybody have any questions? I'll give a brief review about, I'll go through the different facts, just real brief, about what we did last time, just so that's caught up. But besides that, does anybody have any questions? It's been a while, since last time I went, so just want to make sure.
I think, to me, the process of just when you're talking to somebody,
Yeah,
and just the process of finding out where they're coming from
right.
and responding the best way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the great thing about the evidence for the historical evidence for the resurrection is that it's pretty easy to understand. You don't have to go too into depth into much of anything. You just basically you list. I'll get to this in the end, but you list these facts and say, well, there has to be an explanation for these facts. And the best explanation for these facts is that what the Bible actually says happened. And it's a good way to confront somebody that says, well, you believe, you might as well believe in the tooth fairy or the adult Santa Claus or something like that. Like, I literally had somebody say that to me. And I was like, no, like what I believe actually has historical evidence behind it. Jesus actually existed. He actually died on the cross. And those that followed him actually believed through persecution and willing to die for that belief, believed that they saw him rise from the dead and they saw his physical resurrected body. So anyway, I'll go through the facts. I'm not going to have them listed up here. I'm just going to say it out loud.
Are you going through the facts of resurrection?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you if you could just do a little recap.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm listening.
The first fact is that there was a Jewish man named Jesus that is discussed in the Bible, and he actually existed. Okay? And like I said last time, no Western scholar disputes this at all. It's basically unheard of for you to dispute that Jesus was a historical figure. Number two, Jesus had a number of disciples who were Jews and that believed Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, and they grew the early church through evangelism. Once again, no one really disputes this at all. Jesus had disciples, Jesus had followers, they believed he was the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, and they grew the early church. Number three, Jesus was a criminal under Roman authorities and died by Roman crucifixion. Now, like I said last time, no credible scholar actually debates this. This is considered a historic event. But there are those that deny that. Many Muslims deny that Jesus actually died. And so I went through the different medical evidence that we have that somebody through Roman crucifixion, it's basically impossible for them to live through that. And there's only one historical case of somebody surviving the resurrection, and that's because Roman authority took him off of the cross. Somebody surviving, I don't know what I said.
Resurrection.
Oh yeah, somebody surviving the crucifixion was somebody took him off of the cross and through a Roman authority. So Roman authority took him off the cross and they immediately gave him the best medical help available. They did that for 3 people, and 2 of them still didn't survive. They still died, and only 1 survived. And that's the only historical case of we have someone surviving Roman crucifixion. And the Romans had no intention of allowing Jesus to live. And in fact, the guards were persuaded to kill Jesus, because if they weren't able to do that, then they would suffer death. So there's that. Number 4, Jesus' body was buried in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea in Jerusalem. This is the most debated fact that I went over. Jesus being buried in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea. Since last time I read that there were 24 arguments for Jesus' burial in an empty tomb, and there's only 12 arguments against. So Gary Habermas, who basically is the leading scholar, or the head count scholar for the resurrection, he says around 2/3 to 3/4 of scholars, New Testament scholars, believe that he was buried in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea. He believes that. But whenever he debates it, and I'll go into this later, but whenever he debates it, he doesn't even use it, because he feels like he doesn't have to use it. So, but number 4, Jesus' burial in a tomb is the most debated fact that I went over last time. And last time I gave lots of different arguments for why we believe that he was buried in a tomb. Number 5, some of Jesus' women disciples said that they discovered his tomb empty, and B, they saw the resurrected Jesus. And I discussed embarrassing testimony, why it's considered embarrassing testimony for women to be the ones to find Jesus. They're the first ones to see the resurrected Jesus. They're the one that told the main disciples. I discussed the different arguments for this, but once again, because this has to deal with the tomb, it's debated among scholars if this was an actual historical event or not, but I talked about the different reasons of why we believe this actually happened. Basically, it doesn't make sense for them to make this up. If you were going to start a religion and you were just making up a story, you wouldn't have women being the ones that discover the resurrection. Number 6, Jesus' male disciples believed Jesus was raised from the dead, and believed that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, the Son of God, and they were willing to suffer and or die for this belief. Once again, this fact is not really contested among scholars. Almost all of them believe that this was an actual thing, and this is probably the most important point in the case. If you got Jesus, if you can say that Jesus believed that he was the Messiah, the unique Son of God, the disciples believed that he was Messiah, the unique Son of God, he died by Roman crucifixion, and that the disciples believed that he saw his physical resurrected body. Those are the key points. And then you have number 7, which is also a key point, of Saul, who persecuted Christians and then had a radical transformation, and he said that he saw the resurrected physical body of Jesus Christ. So those are the 7 facts that we went over last time. And then right before we moved on to the next one, I was going to present miracles, whether or not the definition of a miracle has to be, by definition, the least likely event, and it can't be, even if it is considered a possible event, if you're even going to put this as the list of possible events of an explanation of Jesus' resurrection, it has to be by definition, the least plausible event. Or some would claim, and I'm going to say that's not true, and that's where we left off. And we're going to start into miracles. But before that, after that big ramble, does anybody have any questions or anything?
Well, this isn't a question, but it was very interesting last week on John Ankerberg. He had an apologist on there, and he was, sounded like he had been in your class.
Well, I don't. This isn't my stuff. This is. I didn't make this stuff up. Like most apologists this is the Christian apologetic argument. This is it. Anybody that's an apologist, this is what they use.
But it was interesting for that to happen at that point.
Yeah.
I'm listening to it, and I thought, oh, this is good.
Yeah. I don't remember when, but he had Dr. William Lane Craig, the founder of Reasonable Faith, on it at one point. So.
And I don't remember who was on there, but.
Yeah. Okay. So miracles. Now we are now going to look into the likelihood of a miracle being an explanation of something. Danny, can you give me some water, a bottle of water real quick? Thank you. One may consider this to be maybe a rabbit trail, but I see it as important when establishing the list of possible outcomes. It is much easier to accept the resurrection as an option once you believe that supernatural explanations to an event is acceptable. Again, after this, you'll have a good understanding of the topic. However, if you want to look at a deep study of miracles, I would recommend the work of Craig S. Keener. I'll put his name. His name will be up here later.
Okay.
But like I will say later, Craig S. Keener, he wrote a book on miracles, which is considered by most scholars the greatest book written about miracles that's ever been written.
Great, yes.
Yeah, the name will be up here eventually. Okay, so how should we even define a miracle? Many people define miracles different ways. Some people define it as a violation to the laws of nature. However, I believe it would be a mistake to define a miracle in this manner. The dictionary defines it as an event that appears inexplicable by the laws of nature and so is held to be supernatural in origin or an act of God. The way I believe a miracle to be defined is an event that cannot be explained by the laws of nature alone, and a supernatural variable is needed to explain the event. So, just for an example, if I were to take this card, the laws of nature dictate that whenever I drop this card, it's going to fall onto the floor, right? Now, if you had your hand below mine and I were to drop this card and you caught it, would you be defying the laws of nature? No, you're intervening into the laws of nature. So that's the same thing that God does. God intervenes, and He becomes an additional variable into the event. And the only explanation of the event is some sort of supernatural thing. It's not something natural. All right, so are miracles even possible? Now, the way that you answer this is going to depend on your philosophical view. If you believe the only thing that exists are things that exist in nature, then of course your answer is going to be no. You do not believe that the supernatural exists, therefore you would never even add it as a variable in explaining an event. Many atheists get their argument against miracles from a guy named David Hume. This is his two-step. Is it working? Okay. So, David Hume. He believed all human knowledge is founded solely in experience, either from objects perceived or results from abstract reasoning. He was a philosopher that came through the Enlightenment period, or the period of reasoning, the period of logic, however you want to call it. It was started in the late 18th century.